My father's name was John Kinsella. It's an Irish name. He was born in North Dakota in 1896 and never saw a big city until he came back from France in 1918. He settled in Chicago, where he quickly learned to live and die with the White Sox. Died a little when they lost the 1919 World Series. Died a lot the following summer when 8 members of the team were accused of throwing that series. He played in the minors for a year or two, but nothing ever came of it. Moved to Brooklyn in 35, married Mom in 38, and was already an old man working at the naval yards when I was born in 1952. My name's Ray Kinsella. Mom died when I was 3, and I suppose Dad did the best he could. Instead of Mother Goose, I was put to bed at night to stories of Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and the great shoeless Joe Jackson. Dad was a Yankees fan then, so of course I rooted for Brooklyn. But in '58, the Dodgers moved away, so we had to find other things to fight about. We did. And when it came time to go to college, I picked the farthest one from home I could find. This, of course, drove him right up the wall, which I suppose was the point. Officially, my major was English, but really it was the 60s. I marched, I smoked some grass, I tried to like sitar music, and I met Annie. The only thing we had in common was that she came from Iowa, and I had once heard of Iowa. After graduation, we moved to the Midwest and stayed with her family as long as we could. Almost a full afternoon. Annie and I got married in June of '74. Dad died that fall. A few years later, Karen was born. She smelled weird, but we loved her anyway. Then Annie got the crazy idea that she could talk me into buying a farm. I'm 36 years old, I love my family, I love baseball, and I'm about to become a farmer. But until I heard the voice, I'd never done a crazy thing in my whole life.
I love that movie. I love everything about Field of Dreams. Maybe you've seen it, maybe it's been a while. This story it opens up this very opening scene, letting you know who Ray is, the struggles he's had with his dad, his love of baseball. This voice is coming. We know if you've seen the movie, the voice will say, if you build it, he will come. And they'll build a baseball field on this farm. And for me, I just got to tell you, the relationships, everything about this movie, I absolutely love. But I love baseball, and we are a baseball family in our house. Huge Braves fans, so pretty much every day we've got a Braves game on, at least in the background, if nothing else. We're watching. We've got our jerseys, the whole deal. Last year, actually, we took the family down to Atlanta, to Truist Park. We did a series down there, and on the last day, we actually got to go on the field. And it was a great experience. So our kids did the, catch the ball at center field wall, hit the wall, and had a blast. Then somebody came out and told us, hey, you can't do that. And we said, oh, shoot. We got in the pictures. And he said, look, he goes, it's not my rule. I'd do it too, but I just have to tell you, you can't do it. And I said, okay. So we made our way around, had a great time. We just love this game. And I have the privilege now of being able to coach my kids. So Joel is 14, Camden's 11, and I remember what it was like when my dad coached me, and when I was 14, playing there, and just enjoying every aspect of the game, enjoying the love of the game, the love of having my dad coaching me, the love of the other coaches that poured into me, love for the teammates, for their families, their siblings, their parents, the friends that came to the games, because it really is about the relationships. That's what it comes down to, and that's what that movie Field of Dreams is about. We could do a 52-week series using Field of Dreams on biblical themes. There's so much there. If you haven't seen the movie in a while, I highly recommend it. Really great stuff. It's really about relationships. And it brings this question, this age-old question that we ask, if you could talk to someone, living or dead, who would that person be that you'd want to sit down and have a conversation with? And of course, we're in church, so the right answer is Jesus, right? But you know what? I can pray to Jesus every day, and I'm going to talk to him for eternity. So there are actually some other people that I would love to talk to. Three in particular. This first one is Evelyn Hutson. This is my grandmother that I never got to meet. She died of cancer when she was 39, when my dad was 17. I know from my dad the profound impact that she had on his life. I know how much she poured into him. And I would love to hear stories of him growing up from her. I would love to know the ways in which their relationship developed and how much she poured into him and just all the things that she told him. I would love to hear those stories from her. I look forward to that one day. Joel Bailey. This is my father-in-law who died 3 years before my wife and I started dating. He had such a profound impact on my wife and who she became that we named our first son Joel after him. He is a wise man. He was a professor. I want to learn more from him, the things that he knew, the things that he taught her. I want to experience those conversations with him. This last one on the right, this is someone I did get to know. This is Don Heatherly. We called him Rainbow. He was my dad's basketball coach. And through a very strange series of events, he was athletic director, but my junior year, there was a whole coaching shakeup, and he was asked to be the basketball coach. So he became my basketball coach as well. And this is a guy who really poured into me. He would pull me out of class. I know this isn't the greatest thing educationally, but he would pull me out of class. We would wander the grounds together, and he would just talk life with me. We would talk about everything and nothing at all. And he just made sure that I knew that I was worthy. He made sure that I knew that I could believe in myself. And I really appreciate that about Rainbow. Big positive influence in my life, and I would love to talk to him again. This idea of this belief, this idea of believing in something, is exactly what we are into for this new sermon series we're in. We've been studying the whole Holy Bible in a year, and we are turning to John's Gospel, and we're looking at John's reasons to believe. John is going to be very specific about this. This is one of those things, you're not supposed to have favorites. I get that. But John is my favorite gospel of all. I just will tell you that now. I love digging into John's gospel. It's different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell you a lot about what Jesus does. John wants to make sure you know who Jesus is. That is his primary focus in writing this gospel. He wants to make sure you know that Jesus is God in the flesh. He wants you to know that wholeheartedly. And so he begins his gospel the same way Genesis begins. He says, in the beginning, the Word, meaning Jesus, already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He wants to make sure you know who Jesus is right off the bat. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. John will painstakingly go through in this gospel, making sure that you don't miss who Jesus is. He'll use this number 7 over and over again in telling the story of Jesus and telling who he is, because 7 is this biblical number for completeness, for wholeness, and he wants you to know that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Scriptures, that Jesus is the fulfillment of all things. And so he'll start with 7 miracles. He'll make sure that you see Jesus doing 7 particular miracles, turning water into wine, healing a government official's son, healing a paralytic by the pool. He'll feed 5,000, but let's be really clear, they were only counting the men, and if we really think about it, marriage and kids, it was probably 20 to 30,000 people that were being fed by 5 loaves and 2 fish. 5 plus 2 is 7, just by the way. He'll walk on water. He'll heal a blind man, and he'll raise Lazarus from the dead. 7 miracles. He'll also focus in on 7 statements that Jesus will make about himself that could only be made about God. They are God quality statements that he makes. He'll call himself the bread of life, the light of the world, the gate for the sheep, the good shepherd, the resurrection, the way, the truth, and the life, and the true vine. Things that you don't say about yourself unless you are God. But there are still people that will say, well, he never actually said he's God. Yeah, I just can't buy that, because he also makes these 7 I am statements. This I am statement is a statement where he uses the name of God, Yahweh, or in the Greek, ego eimi. And if you actually say those words, Yahweh or ego eimi, you are saying the name of God. And as a good Jewish man, as Jesus was, you don't say the name of God unless you are God. And he does it 7 times. I am, ego eimi, Yahweh, the Messiah, to the woman at the well. He says to the disciples while he's walking on the water, Yahweh, I am here. He has to say it a lot to the Pharisees, and they don't like that. They get really upset. But he says, I am Yahweh, I am who I claim to be. And when you have lifted the Son of Man, me, Jesus, up on a cross, then you will understand that Yahweh, I am He. Jesus is not mincing words here. Then he goes even further. Before Abraham was even born, I am Yahweh. This is who I am. He is letting them know he is God in the flesh. Just like he told the woman at the well, he says to the disciples at the Last Supper, I am the Messiah. And to those that would arrest him, Yahweh, ego eimi, I am he. Why is John writing this gospel? He wants to make it extremely clear to you that it is because he wants you to know who Jesus is. He even closes his gospel right at the very end saying, these things are written so that you may continue to believe. Everyone say believe. So that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, God in the flesh, and that by believing in him, you will have life by the power of his name. John wants to be really clear. And the reason John is wanting to make sure you know this is because he had a life-changing conversation that completely altered his life, that completely changed the course of his life. It started in a very simple place. John is fishing with his brother James. This is kind of the remains of a boat about that time. John is fishing with his brother James and their father Zebedee. Jesus comes along and says, follow me. Now, John and James get out of the boat and they follow Jesus. And we might go, really? You left your dad in the boat? What's going on here? You have to understand that to be a disciple is a very coveted position. This is like if you've never gone to medical school and somebody said, you can be a doctor. Like, you want to go do this. And I promise you, Zebedee, as a good father, wasn't going, hey, where are you going? He was going, go, get out of here. You need to go follow this man. It's a life-changing conversation that John has with Jesus, and he would have many more that would set the trajectory of his life. But Jesus, in these first 7 chapters of John that we've been reading this week, he is going to have a lot of life-changing conversations. And one of the ones that we heard read by Sarah a little bit earlier is when he meets Nicodemus. Nicodemus is this Pharisee who comes to Jesus by night. Now, in John's gospel, you really want to pay attention to light and dark, night and day, because they mean something. Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night. He is not ready to declare that he might be interested in what Jesus has to say. He wants to come in secret, just him and Jesus. And he's got questions, but he doesn't even know how to ask them, so he makes a statement at first. He says, we know you come from God because no one could do the things that you do unless they come from God. There's not a question in that, but Jesus feels the heart behind it. And he says, here's what you need to know. If you want to be part of God's kingdom, if you want to be in God's holy heaven, part of what God is doing. You got to be born again. And now Nicodemus is thinking with his head, and he's like, how am I going to get back into my mother's womb and be born again? And Jesus says, well, let me tell you, unless you're born of water and the Spirit, unless you are born again by God, you will not be part of the kingdom of heaven. And now the question finally comes. And Nicodemus is like, how can this be? Everything that I've ever known, you're upending. How can this be? And Jesus would go on to tell him this verse that whether you've been in church all your life or this is your first time in a church, you've probably heard it. He says, God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, so that whoever believes in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. John 3:16. But here's the thing. Jesus wants to bring Nicodemus into the light. Nicodemus comes in the dead of night, and he wants to open Nicodemus's eyes. And so as he is speaking to Nicodemus and he's laying this truth on him, just 3 verses later, he says this, God's light, talking about himself, God's light came into the world. But people love the darkness more than the light. John so wants us to understand this theme of light and dark that when he opens his gospel, the Word was with God, the Word was God, in the beginning was the Word. He follows it up with these words. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light. Everyone say light. Brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. It is a theme that we want to pay attention to. And so in this movie, Field of Dreams, there is a point where the field has been made. The baseball field is there, and they're waiting to see what's going to happen. And one night, a man shows up. Man shows up at Shoeless Joe Jackson. He comes in the night just like Nicodemus does to check out this field. And in this night, Ray and Shoeless Joe have a little bit of batting practice, and then they're having this conversation. They actually start talking about the light and the dark. They start talking about why we're playing at night instead of in the day. What's going on here? And this conversation is one that will completely change the course of Ray's life. He was starting to feel hopeless before Shoeless Joe shows up. Why have I done this? Why have I made this field? And then he shows up and they have this conversation, a life-changing conversation. Take a look.
It's my family.
What's with the lights?
Oh, all the stadiums have them now. Even Wrigley Field.
Makes it harder to see the ball.
Yeah, well, the owners found that more people could attend night games.
Owners.
Mr. Jackson, this is my wife, Annie, and my daughter, Karen.
Ma'am? Hi.
Are you a ghost?
Karen? Just kidding.
It's okay. What do you think?
You look real to me.
Well, then I guess I'm real.
Would you like to come inside?
Thanks. I don't think I can. Could I come back again?
Yeah. I built this for you.
There are others, you know. There were 8 of us. It really mean a lot to them.
Yeah. Anytime. They're all welcome here.
Hey! Is this heaven?
No. It's Iowa. know. We're keeping this field.
I would love to show the rest of that scene, but I can't play in church what his wife says. Let's just say she affirms that decision, that you should definitely be keeping this field. We're having a life-changing conversation, and we need that support sometimes when we're going to make big changes in our lives. I had two life-changing conversations in 2014. The first one was with my wife. I had left teaching, and I was being a stay-at-home dad. Our kids had some health issues, and so we were gone to Tennessee. We were driving back, and I remember my wife asked this question. She said, so when the kids go off fully to school, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back to teaching? Are you going to continue being a stay-at-home dad? Are you going to do something else? And I said, I know this sounds crazy, but I'm thinking about seminary. I think that I'm being called to be a pastor. And my wife said to me, and I'll never forget it, yeah, that sounds about right. So what do we do about that? I promise you, if she hadn't said that, I'm not standing here today. No way. So I knew it was still going to be a couple more years because my kids needed to finish school, but I reached out to somebody else to have a conversation. Reached out to Pastor Mike. And I had been corresponding with him just via email, asking all kinds of questions for a couple years at that point. And I sent him a question. I said, hey, I need some advice. I really want to get your take on something. I know you're busy, so sometime in the next year, can I get on your calendar? And I got an email back in 15 minutes that said, how about Tuesday? I said, oh, we're going to do this a lot quicker than I thought. And so I went in and I started sharing with him, here's why I feel like I'm getting called into the ministry. Here's the things I'm experiencing. What do you think? And at the end of it, he said, yeah, I think you're getting a call. I think that you do need to pursue this. And so the next thing I found, I was in seminary and starting this new journey. My life was altered by this conversation. See, Jesus shows up in a variety of ways to us, and he can steer us in new directions. He's doing that throughout this whole first 7 chapters of John. One conversation after another. I've already told you about Nicodemus. Right after Nicodemus, he goes and he meets the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. And as he's going there, she goes in the day, not because she's trying to expose everything, but because at the hot part of the day, no one else will come out there. She wants to be alone. She feels judged by the world. She doesn't want anyone to see her. And then Jesus shows up. And he says, would you give me a drink of water? And she says, how can you ask me that as a Jewish person? I'm a Samaritan. You know we don't get along. Why would you ask that of me? And he says, well, if you knew who I was, then you'd be asking me for water, and I would give you living water, and you would never thirst again. And she's like, great. Please, sir, give me this water. And he reveals to her a couple things. One, he says, go get your husband. And she says, I don't have one. And he says, you're right. You've had 5. And the person you're with right now is not your husband. How do you know this? Because I am Yahweh, ego eimi, the Messiah, he reveals to her. She is blown away by this, experiencing what he knows, experiencing who he is, and she goes and tells everyone. She understands that her past doesn't define her because he is there for her. His love is for her, regardless of what the others in town say, regardless of what anyone else has to say about it. He loves her. He showed up for her. It changes her life. He goes on, and he's met by this government official who has sought out Jesus because his son is deathly ill. And he wants Jesus. He needs Jesus. He is desperate for Jesus. You can hear the agony even on the text. Lord, please come now before my little boy dies. Have you felt that desperation before? You know what that's like? What it's like to feel like there's no hope? You need a miracle? Fortunately for me, I have experienced that. In 2012, we had just completed a routine surgery for my son Camden to get cochlear implants. Everything went great. Surgery's a success. We're super excited. We're celebrating. We're in the recovery room, my wife and I. We're so glad to have our son back. And then he seizes up. And we realize very quickly he can't breathe. And he's turning blue before our eyes. And all we can do is just cry out for help. Help! Take our son. We are desperate for somebody to help us. They call code blue, and doctors and nurses come running in from everywhere. And every second just felt like an eternity. We were desperate for our son to live. Finally, we hear a cry, a drawing in of breath. He can breathe again. He's going to live. But it hurt. It was so scary. We felt full-on desperation in that moment. We needed a miracle. Jesus shows up. Jesus showed up for that government official's son, and when he is on his way back home, some people are coming from his house, and they say, your son's going to be okay. Jesus had told him to go home, your son will live. And he says, when did he start getting better? About 1 o'clock yesterday. That's when I was talking with Jesus. And he said, go, your son will live. He realizes who Jesus is, power that he has, and he believes, and he tells his whole family about Jesus, and they all believe. Changes their lives. Jesus goes on. He comes upon a man who's been paralyzed his whole life by the pool of Bethesda, and it was believed by the people that this pool had special healing properties, that when the water would bubble up, if you could be the first one in, you could be healed of whatever ailed you. And this man had been sitting by this pool for 30 years, trying to be the first one in, to be healed, so that he could walk again. And Jesus comes along and he asks this question, do you want to be healed? Sometimes when we get asked questions, we go to the things that we know. And he says, I can't, sir, for I have no one to put me in the pool. He's stuck. Have you ever felt stuck? There's no way out of this situation. He just wants to be healed. And he has been sitting there for 30 years waiting for that to happen. Somebody always gets in front of him. And Jesus shows up. And he's made well and he can walk again. He didn't need the pool. He needed a conversation with Jesus. And in that, he stands up and he goes out and he tells everyone. He goes out and he tells everyone about Jesus. What he can do for you. How he can change your life. He starts spreading the news. This good news. Because he experiences God's love. See, it's not our past, it's not our hurts, it's not the things in this life that are difficult that define us. It's God's love. God so loved the world. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that whoever would believe in him would not perish but have everlasting life. to believe. To believe. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast. Nicodemus is trying to have his eyes open to come out of the darkness and into the light. He starts in that conversation in the night with Jesus, and something starts to happen in him. And just a few chapters later, in chapter 7, the last one we've been reading this week, the Pharisees are ready to kill Jesus, to arrest him, to throw him in prison, to execute him, for whatever reason they want to come up with. And Nicodemus starts to step into the light. And he says these words, "Is it legal to convict a man before he's been given a hearing?" And they turn on Nicodemus quick. "Who are you? Are you from Galilee too, like this man? Don't talk to us about things you don't know. We know what's going on. You just listen to us." But Nicodemus' eyes are being opened because he's had a life-changing conversation with Jesus Christ. And then on Good Friday, when Jesus would go to the cross to lay down his life for you, for me, for Nicodemus, for the woman at the well, for the government official and his son and his family, for all the people he was encountering, like the paralytic at the pool of Bethesda, Jesus would lay down his life, and at that moment that looks like most defeat, a secret disciple comes out. Someone who didn't want to let people know in the light that they were a follower of Jesus. A man named Joseph of Arimathea. And he asked Pilate to take down the body to put it in a tomb. Pilate grants him permission. But come on, you got to know what's coming. Joseph wasn't alone. With him came Nicodemus, the man who started in the dark because he didn't want anyone to know that he was even considering following Jesus. And in the moment of most defeat, what appears to be the end, he declares himself in the light as a follower of Jesus. And don't miss this part. If you want to know what Nicodemus believed, he brought about 75 pounds of perfumed ointment with him. And you may ask, is that normal? Yeah, when you're burying a king. It's normal when you are burying a king. Nicodemus knows exactly who he's following. His life has been changed by an encounter with his Savior. And in the moment when everyone thought he had been defeated, Nicodemus comes out into the light, says, "This is who I'm following. You think he's dead? Wait a couple days. I know who I'm following." In this movie, Field of Dreams, Ray thinks he's had the encounter he was waiting on. He thought he had built the field for Shoeless Joe Jackson. If you build it, he will come. But Shoeless Joe wants to reveal something, to bring something out into the light for Ray, to let his eyes be fully opened. You thought you were building it for me. Let me show you why you're really here, Ray. Take a look.
What are you grinning at, you ghost?
If you build it, he will come.
What is it?
It's my father. catch a good game.
Thank you. It's so beautiful here. For me, it's like a dream come true. Can I ask you something? Is this heaven?
It's Iowa.
Iowa? Could have sworn it was heaven.
Is there a heaven?
Oh, yeah. It's the place dreams come true.
Maybe this is heaven.
Good night, Ray.
Good night, John. Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
I'd like that.
Seen that movie probably 30 times. It gets me every time. It's about the relationship. It's about the life-changing conversation. And I hope you didn't miss it. His dad's name is John. And John is pointing Ray to a deeper truth. Is there a heaven? Oh, yeah. It's a place where dreams come true. There is something deeper you need to know here. I want you to see it come out into the light. Come experience the truth. There is a hope that you are not defined by your past. You are not a mistake. That God came because He loves you. It's for you. Truth that God sent His one and only Son into this world because He loved you. But you know, we hear that verse. It's powerful. It's just as important to hear the very next one. God sent His Son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through Him. For you, for me, for Nicodemus, for all the people he encountered with those life-changing conversations. He wants to change your life, if you let Him. He wants you to believe He has the power to change who you are, to put you on a path that will forever transform you. We can let all kinds of things guide us. We can let all kinds of things tell us in this world who we are. But none of them are Jesus. When we let Him tell us how much He loves us, how you were uniquely and wonderfully made, on purpose, for a purpose, and you let him define that for you? Realize that your mistakes aren't it. Your experiences, your troubles, your heartaches. Jesus loves you. He's here for you. If you were the only one that ever was born, he'd still have come for you. Let that truth sink in. Believe it with all your heart. John wants you to know who Jesus is. He's God. He's God in the flesh. When we believe that truth, it changes every single thing because he loves you that much. Amen. Let's stand and sing about that truth.